Simón, para el oro 20 de Juárez, es para ustedes. Una vez, un vato loco.
Welcome to The Bomb Squad. I'm your host, Andrew Hada, award-winning writer-director of the film The Empty Space and also another film called The Last Ones. And we're here as part of our summer of guests that doesn't start till August. And so today we've brought, of course, Josh is here, but nobody cares. But today we've brought on a very special guest. We've brought on Angela Benson. Angela, will you say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi. Well, first of all, I'm a huge fan of the Bomb Squad podcast and Andrew Hada. And I am a freelance writer on Vocal Plus, and I cover, just film marketing, film promotion, mainly independent horror, but not just specific to the horror genre.
Cool. And how'd you get into that?
Honestly, I just have always loved film and always wanted to be a part of making films that I just used the skills I had and the few contacts I had and answered an ad on Reddit, actually. So I just kind of started winging it and freelancing, and it's worked out for about, the past year. Just having fun, basically, not really much to it other than just wanting to spread word about, awesome stuff people are making.
Well, that's awesome. And also, she has written an article about myself. We'll link to it on our YouTube and our Twitter page, but go check that out and we'll give it a read. Also, I also answered an ad on Reddit and I became red pilled, and so now I hate I hate everyone. But yeah, so today we're talking about A Haunting in Connecticut, which is Angela's pick. Josh, why don't you? Oh, before we get into it, let me break down some technical. A Haunting in Connecticut came out in 2009. It is directed by Peter Cornwell, who is the most British person I've ever. That's like the most British name ever. It stars Angela Madsen, Eli Cotis, who everyone knows as Casey Jones, and also Adam Simon and Tim Metcalf. And Josh, why don't you tell us what this movie is about?
Okay. So a young mother driving her son to cancer treatments figures out her current home is too far away. So she rents a home closer to the hospital. But there's something off about this house, something sinister, one might say. That's my synopsis.
Where is the house?
It's in the greater New England area.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Angela, why did you pick this? Why did you pick Haunting in Connecticut for the film?
Because I just feel like when it first came out, I was a young teen and I really liked it. I had no issues with it. Sure, it kind of played into a couple of the haunted house tropes, which I know is a big issue that some people had with it. But for the most part, I just thought it was a really solid film and got me excited about horror again, into my teen years. Because as a younger child, I wasn't really watching horror movies. I can't relate to a lot of the people that, were doing that. It's awesome, but I didn't have that experience growing up, unfortunately. But when it did pick up again, it started kind of with The Haunting in Connecticut. And I didn't find out until later that, people had such a issue with this movie. So it was kind of a surprise to me, and I've never really discussed that with anybody publicly. So
that makes sense. I feel like everyone who's like a teen, like eventually there's always that horror movie that kind of gets you into horror,
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think it was the Aliens movies.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, I actually, it was one of those things where I saw it was rated PG-13, where I was like, oh, they're gonna like, this is gonna be some like BS, but they do that thing where they cut like 1 second before it would be rated R, and so it's like, oh, so it's still like kind of like suspenseful and has a lot of horror to it. You just don't see like the grossest part, but your mind fills in that blank anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those. I mean, I just like the general idea of, because the son starts seeing the ghost first, but he's on like some experimental cancer drug that like hallucinations might be one of the side effects, but if it is a side effect, they might have to take you off the drug. So he's in this kind of like trapped area where if he tells anyone about the hallucinations, he could essentially lose this drug that could save his life. But if he doesn't tell anyone about the hallucinations, he might be going crazy or he might be seeing ghosts. Either one of those things is bad. Um, and so, like, I just like that premise of he's kind of trapped by our healthcare system. And if I can find a way to criticize our healthcare system, I'll do it. Um, but yeah, I think it's I think it's an interesting premise, and you have kind of like in a lot of horror movies and especially haunted house movies, it's like, why don't you guys just leave? But in this one, he literally, I mean, the family can't, because if they leave, there's no other place to go, and like they're out of luck as far as the medical treatment is. So it kind of gives them a reason to stay without like outright saying it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really well put. Because, yeah, I think it's like it's kind of almost misunderstood because, I mean, a lot of people have similar issues like that where, because of medical expenses or because of a living situation or whatever, they are kind of stuck in a situation, maybe not where they think they're seeing ghosts, but maybe. And it's like, I don't know, like that is super terrifying to me. I mean, it's not really gore or, you're seeing spooky ghosts and special effects, but just like the premise alone is just kind of horrifying, really.
And he's not in it a lot, but the dad is like, he kind of brings it up because they already own a house. And then the wife's like, I'm going to rent this house. And then he kind of begrudgingly goes along with it. And he's very like, well, I can barely afford this. And then she starts being like, oh, I think something's wrong. And he's like, oh, now something's wrong with the house you rented. So it's like, they're kind of like financially trapped there. It is kind of an interesting, like, oh yeah, it's like a real life dynamic to it,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, can we talk about the dad? Because he was my favorite character. He was like constantly getting, getting drunk.
He's great.
At one point, everyone's describing the scary things that are happening to him, and then he's like, "And the food was rotten," and it's like, where have you been, man? You're not present in this situation.
Because he's the only one who never sees the ghosts. Yeah. So as far as he knows, his wife rents this house, and then the whole family starts freaking out at him, and then they burn the house down. he's like, oh great, thanks.
He's like, what is happening? What's going on? Who's this priest guy?
I sold my truck for this.
Yeah, there's even one part where he's kind of like, he's talking about how much he works, and he wants to start drinking. He's like a recovering alcoholic, and then he picks up a guitar. And I was like, oh, I hope there's a subplot where he starts like a dad band. It's just like on his own, like rocking out.
Yeah, I want to see the alternate movie where it's just a dad having like a midlife crisis to the point where he doesn't realize that his family's being haunted by mummies.
Right, because we really don't get to see like what's going on. Like we kind of just see him in a drunken rage and at the worst time of his life, like his kid's dying, whatever. But like, yeah, I would think it would be interesting to really explore that character more.
Yeah, and I think like one of the things that helps this movie is the cast. Like the kid who's he's played by Kyle Gallner. And he's been in a bunch of other things.
That's not how you say. It's got to not be Gallagher.
It is. He was in Jennifer's Body. But
yep.
And but he does like a good job of like kind of like he has a hard role pretty much because he has to play like a sick kid who thinks he's going crazy but also has to like believe it enough to like start to fight it after a while. Mm-hmm. And he does such a good job of putting you in that mindset. And I think the mom also does a good job of like, again, she's like a desperate, especially like either, I mean, we joke about it, but the dad is kind of not present, and so the mom takes the brunt of like the emotional and like dealing with the financial aspects of the situation. And so Virginia Madsen, she does a great job of like having all that. Like she's just a good strong mom character, and she does like she kind of carries especially the first half of the film. I did like, okay, so at the beginning she's like looking for a house, and the guy is like putting up the for rent sign, and he just like sells it to her so quickly. It's like you should have figured out. You should have figured out something
Oh
was
yeah.
wrong here.
Yeah, I think she kind of agrees to rent it without even seeing the whole house. And then the very first time they go in the basement, there's like a locked room to like a cadaver room, and it's like I would immediately be questioning what I'd done.
Yeah. Yeah, but I appreciate the spur of the moment because that's also how I have my place that has turned into a mess. Because I also bought it spur of the moment because it was 100 years old, so I especially relate to that.
Yeah, it happens. And I mean, she was in such a situation too. What do you really do?
I don't know. I think we're all cutting out.
No, you're talking. You're talking right now. We're all hearing you gasp for whatever you're trying to say.
Well, no, because I was starting and then it cut out when you started saying something.
Oh
So I
yeah,
wonder
because
if there's
I
like
was
a
gonna start
delay.
saying something and then you started talking, so
Okay,
I
cut all this out. Go ahead.
it's all staying in. This is what the fans come for. This witty repertoire.
Oh,
Are you gonna say what you're gonna say?
I know. I was gonna say when the haunting really gets going, they do this real big emphasis on because they figure out essentially that some horrible like crime happened here, and you find out the person who owned it ran a funeral home, and he was super into like necromancy, and they find like evidence of like they call it ectoplasm where like it like kind of like comes out of people's mouths as they're being haunted.
Yeah,
And there's something like it's weird because it's one of those things where it's not necessarily like violent, but there's something so off-putting about like seeing it. Like they see it in still photographs first, and it's almost like I don't know, kind of the tension of like, oh, that makes it seem more real because it's like, oh, they couldn't have like faked a photograph of this back then. You know what I mean? Like it's like,
right.
oh yeah, like how would you explain seeing like a photograph from the 1800s with like this like presence like coming out of someone? I don't know. It's I think it really does like an effective job of like, okay, it's like escalating the horror without showing a lot of like violence and gore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think like first of all, I just like that they actually call it ectoplasm in the movie because I always thought
Yeah.
that ectoplasm was just invented by the Ghostbusters because it sounds like a Ghostbusters thing. But then you remember that Dan Aykroyd is like a weirdo who believes all that stuff. So he actually took real things, and so when you see it in other media, it's always fun. But I think that's one of the cool things about it is like the history behind the house. And apparently this is based on a true story, and we'll get to it a little later. But
Well,
oh yeah, I definitely love the history of the house kind of concept of it because I actually, at the time of when The Haunting in Connecticut came out, I was living in an old hospital from the early 1900s. It was a refurbished home, obviously, but like it was like a landmark or something. So it was just interesting. And in the basement, there was an old table down there, which was rumored to have been the old embalming table. But I mean, I don't really know why you would keep that. So, who knows? But young teen Ange was, definitely like, ooh, this is kind of spooky because the haunting in Connecticut, was an old funeral parlor. This is an old hospital. So it definitely kind of fed that, a little bit of fear in a child's mind. I guess you would say a PG-13 child watching a PG-13 spooky movie. But just interesting because there really are places like that, and how she was finding the old photographs, which is also a thing they used to do photography with the dead. We never found anything like that other than just some images of the old staff, and in the backyard when my dad was digging for a fence there was old pill bottles, so I suppose they used to just bury their trash.
Yeah, man, even now as an adult, if I lived in an old hospital and saw this movie, I would be freaked out.
Oh
So,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, living in an old hospital sounds super cool.
I know, I'm
Um,
not even superstitious, but I know Andrew is incredibly superstitious
I'm
and
I'm
Catholic,
I'm
so I can't
super
imagine.
I'm superstitious.
So,
Right.
Um, um, I'm admiring my own joke that I
do
made.
you want to try it again? Maybe make
No,
it better?
it's a perfect 10
Maybe
out of
go back
10.
and post and have yourself saying something clever there
I'm just gonna
instead.
go back and post it at the laughs that should have accompanied it. Um, Also, okay, and this has nothing to do with the movie, but okay, so there's mummies in this. I guess they're mummies. I mean, they're all wrapped up like mummies, which is one of
Well, yeah,
my
they're being embalmed, right? That's the
yeah. They're being
idea.
embalmed, but they look like mummies, which I really enjoyed because there's not enough like people are always like, where are all the werewolf movies? But there's only been so many mummy movies. I feel like we need more. But the thing
Absolutely. I know.
I really, again, like Eli Cotis plays the priest character, and I really liked his character a lot too. Because again, it could have been very easily like, oh, it's just a priest, but he kind of plays him like kind of angry and reluctant.
Shit. Because we're not like other people anymore. You see, most people spend their life firmly planted in this world, then one day they go straight to the other side. But we take a much more roundabout path. We spend quite a lot of time in the borderland.
Yeah,
And
he has this like kind of almost like he's like this
he's
weird where you're like,
creepy.
oh, is this guy? Yeah, is this guy tricking them? Like, or is he just like
Yeah,
that? You find out like that's not the case, but it's very much like he clearly has had like a hard life. You know?
yeah. Because the whole time I thought like, oh, the reason that he's like this because he's part of the house. But it's like, no, it's just like if you're fighting ghosts all the time, you would also be kind of bitter and a little bit creepy.
He's haunted, and then later, because he comes over to be like, oh. I'm going to investigate this for you. And then he's there with like the son and everything. And then the mom comes home and is like, what is this creepy older man just doing in my house? And it's like, yeah, that she's right to feel that way.
Yeah, you're correct.
Oh, I was just gonna say now with the real story behind the haunting in Connecticut, I did a little bit of research about, and so the actual incidents happened in 1986. I'm not sure if you guys knew that.
Yeah, I knew it was in the past. It almost had to be because of Lorraine and the dude Warren. Ed.
Right. And then, so the book regarding the haunting in Connecticut came out in 1992, was written by Ray Garton, and it's called In a Dark Place, The Story of a True Haunting, written about I might be saying this wrong, but I believe it's Snedeker family from Southington, Connecticut. So that is who it is written about. That's the real family it happened to. And so the controversy surrounding this is that who I guess I would understand to be Matt, Kyle Gallner's character. I'm sure they changed the real names because I don't know. I don't believe Ray Garton is the person that this happened to, but whoever the supposed story happened to claimed that it was Ed Warren that said, Ed and Lorraine that said was a formal funeral home where necromancy was performed, and so they did an exorcism. And then later, supposedly the guy claimed that Ed said, exaggerate on your book, make it scary, you know. But, who really knows? And either way, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the haunting in Connecticut. Literally nobody that worked on this movie had anything to do with that. So I try and separate it, same as most people do with the current
Yeah.
Warren characters in the Conjuring universe anyway. So
Yeah.
So
Yeah, also, the only difference is that there's like a documentary about it, and that's called A Haunting in Connecticut, and this one's called The Haunting in Connecticut. I just like A Haunting more than the.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I don't know why, but that's the only real thing that annoys me about this whole situation.
I prefer a haunting in Connecticut ? Like they're not sure if there was one.
That's the sequel, A Haunting in Connecticut ? Ghost of Trivia.
That's when Ed and Lorraine roll up and they're like, "Was there one? We're gonna look into it."
But yeah, no, it's definitely worth checking out. And yeah, it's the same thing where it's like I don't care. And I think a lot of times like things true ghost stories are often hindered by the fact that ghosts like I mean real ghost sightings like it would be creepy if it happened to you, but if you're reporting it to someone else, it's like that's not creepy. Like I think of that scene in Poltergeist where like she's unpacking the things and then she turns around and suddenly all the everything's on top of the table, like everything's on top of all the chairs and stuff are on top of the table, and that freaks her out. But if you like try to explain that to someone, they'd be like, okay. It's like I moved and all the chairs are different. It's like, yeah, sure, man. And so I think like that might be the case of I think that happened a lot with the Warrens where the actual story was a ghost story and they just kind of embellished it to make it more suitable for American audiences, which is technically what all true stories do in one way or another. So I'm okay with it. Um, and it's on Hulu. It's pretty short. It's only an hour and a half. So I think that it's so go check it out. Go check it out if you get the chance. Um, and yeah, I think we're pretty good. Angela, is there anything else you want to add?
No, just thank you guys for welcoming me onto your platform. I love the show, and I, I just really am excited for the future of Nothing Ventured Media and anything else you guys are a part of. I love it.
Yeah, well, thank you. And if people want to find you, where's the best place to find you?
Well, they can go to vocal.media/authors/Angela Rose. And I am also on Twitter at Horror Writer Ange.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and that's the best place to find all her writings and stuff. Go check it out, and I'll link it. But just in case you guys find this easier, it's always good to have both. And yeah, I think that's it. Josh, any last thoughts on haunting in Connecticut?
Um, no, Connecticut truly a terrifying place, though. So I would avoid it if you could.
Yeah, I wish that they had ended with him being like, "I guess the real haunting was the insurance company." Um, but yeah, no, I was pleasantly surprised, and I think consider me a skeptic who was proven wrong. So go check it out. And I think that's it for this episode, guys. Thank you, Angela, for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time on the bot. Hold on, I gotta do my thing. So go check out the last ones in Borderland on whatever streaming service I said at the beginning of this episode that I've added in. And also keep your eye out for the empty space. Who knows where it is? And maybe there's some fun stuff on my YouTube page. There should be stuff coming or out already.
You
Um,
think they're gonna do that thing where they put the last ones on streaming again, but use the cover for like that South American movie where they're like shooting zombies at like in a skyscraper, like they did that
Listen,
one
guys,
time.
whatever gets eyes on the prize.
You're like, look,
You guys
you
want to
could
use
put
whatever cover you want to use. I'm okay
put
with
Brad Pitt on the cover. Be like,
it. Yeah.
yeah, he might be in this. Watch
I
it,
mean,
please.
technically, it's about the whole world, so he's in it. I can put whoever I want on that cover because technically they started the thing. But yeah, go check them out. Keep an eye on all our socials, and we'll keep you updated. So thank you guys as always for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Bomb Squad.